sheet. Yeah, see for, hey, what are you hiding over in the corner for? Come up here at this thing and let's look at you. Senator Hickman, we're here to present Senate Bill 126. No, sir, you go ahead. We'll pray after you get through. We'll see if they still love you.
Good afternoon. Thank y'all, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to be here. Thank you for allowing me to present Senate Bill 126, which is LC 500477. Is that correct? Okay, thank you, sir. Let me just tell you a little bit about this bill. And this bill provides a system to ensure that payment card networks either exclude the amount of taxes from the calculation of interchange fees, commonly referred to as swipe fees, or refund an amount of interchange fee proportionate to the amount attributable to the taxes. These fees are typically being charged by American Express, Visa, MasterCard, and other type of companies like that. And there's no disagreement on the fees being charged on the product. And that is like for instance, your coat, Mr. Chairman, there's no disagreement that fees be charged on that coat. The disagreement comes in, and I'll get a little bit further on in and just say, fees being charged on the sales taxes on that coat. Senate Bill 126 eliminates the fees from being charged on the sales tax collected. As you know, with COVID, everyone started ordering online. I know we did at our house. My wife, almost every day we get something online. A lot of businesses quit taking cash, and a lot of them quit taking checks, so really reverted to everyone using credit cards. Retailers typically pay between 2 and 4% on interchange or swipe fees. For almost all retailers, swipe fees are the second highest cost after labor costs. And I actually confirmed that with several of our clients over last weekend. Not only do retailers pay the swipe fees or interchange fees on the products, they pay swipe or interchange fees on the sales taxes also. Credit card companies are profiting from the swipe fees on the sales tax. Now let me give you an example. Mr. Chairman, that's a great looking coat you got on today, and I admire you the way you're dressed today. I appreciate it. But let's just say that coat costs you, and I know it costs you a lot more than this. Let's just say that coat costs you $200, okay? And the swipe fee on that coat would be 3% of $200, okay, which is $6. But in addition to that, the sales tax on that coat, if it's in an 8% sales tax area, would be $16. Well, the swipe fee would also be charged on the sales tax. So there'd be 3% of that sales tax of $16, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 48 cents. But you take that and multiply that by every small business in Georgia. This is in Georgia. That amounts to a great bit of money, which is being charged back to the retailer that sells it. We went to Zaxby's over the weekend and took our family, and our bill was $75.24, and the sales tax was $2.25, and the swipe fee charge was $2.25, sales tax $6, and it was 19 cents paid on the swipe fee for the sales tax. That's what this is all about. I talked to one of our client friends over the weekend, Anthony Waters with L.A. Waters Furniture Company in Statesboro. And Anthony told me that his swipe fees or interchange fees last year on furniture in his business was about $9,600. That's $9,600 that he paid out of his own business profits for interchange fees on the sales tax, swipe fees being charged on the sales tax, okay? Now, we all know that in the world that we're in the last couple of years, the inflation rates have been out of sight, and consequently this is just another fee that's being charged back to our retailers that really is hurting our small businesses. This would really be a game changer, I think, in a lot of cases for small business. You take my example with Anthony Waters, and you multiply that through all of Statesboro, you very well could be talking about hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of dollars in our little local economy that is being charged by swipe fees on sales taxes. Senate Bill 126 is supported by the NFIB, supported by Georgia Retailers, Georgia Food Industry Association, Georgia Restaurant Association, Georgia Agribusiness Council, Georgia Convenience Stores, Georgia Hotel and Lodging Association. Prohibiting swipe or interchange fees on state-required taxes will keep dollars inside Georgia instead of going outside of Georgia. With the rise of inflation, as I stated earlier, retailers are trying to find ways to keep prices down. No retailer wants to have to increase their prices by passing on swap fees to our citizens. Mr. Chairman, I know that there are a lot of people here today. This is a packed house. I signed up to speak, and I know we're already running behind time, and I respect your time. So I'm going to now turn it over to the people that have signed up, and let them speak. Thank you, sir.
This is a hearing only, so
Yeah.
it's a
Thank
hearing
you.
only to hear this today.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you for that explanation. Got one question for you, if you don't mind, before you leave. And I've asked this question to both sides. I mean, you had the room full of people obviously for and against the
That's
the
right.
bill. Is the system broke that we're doing now? Is there something wrong with the system that we're doing now, just in general?
I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with the system. It's just a matter of these companies making money off charging on sales tax. That's what it's.
And got one more question. Correct me if I'm wrong now. If we change this bill, it's my understanding that every transaction would require 2 swipes.
No, and I think in this bill is actually is one or two things. Either it would be charged like it is right now, and then the money rebated back to the individual company, the Anthony Waters, instead of right now where he charges sales tax on his furniture. So if we change it, we may have to do 2 swipes, or and I think the big word is or these credit card companies would rebate him back to $9,600 or $8,500, whatever that number is.
I bet we're fixing to find out. Thank you,
Yeah,
Mr.
thank you, sir. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Any questions? I'm sorry, any question? Did you have one for the chairman? Okay, what number you might? What number you?
I think I'm going to sit down and stay here.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Senator Hickman, just one question.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned Anthony Waters Furniture.
Yes,
in
sir.
Statesboro, Georgia. Let's just say they sell a couch for $1,000. And your sales taxes in Statesboro are what? 7?
8%.
8%.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to get $1,080.
That's correct, sir.
If I'm buying that sofa, and if I use my credit card, how much money are they going to get?
Well, what
They're-
they still gonna get the $1,080.
And where's that money going to come from?
It's gonna come from the consumer.
It's going to
gonna
come from. It's going to come from the bank.
From you.
It's going to come from the bank that is helping Anthony Waters and the bank that represents my card, right?
I
So-
don't know if
so
I
the-
quite. I don't know if I quite
so the-
understand the question.
The bank will advance $1,080 to Anthony Waters.
Now that part is correct.
Okay, and then the bank will charge somebody somewhere is gonna, my card's gonna get charged for $1,080.
That is correct.
But the question I'm asking is it true that that Anthony Waters Furniture gets the entire $1,080 and it does come from the bank?
They do get $1,080,
Alright.
but they also.
Just wanna make sure.
That sounds like an attorney question then.
Any more
Thank you, sir.
questions, Senator Hickman? What are you?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under that same scenario, what if the consumer is using a debit card?
The debit card charges are also would not be allowed on the sales tax portion of the fee.
So they could not use their debit card to.
No, they could
But when they
use it.
still
That's-
get, say, the
that's why I say
$1,080,
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
wouldn't that $1,080 under the previous question, wouldn't all of that money come out of the customer's account on the debit card?
Yes, sir, it would.
Okay, so it's not like the bank is advancing them money. They're using their own funds
Well,
directly out of their
that would
account.
be true in that case, yes, sir. It would
Thank you.
come out of their personal account, yes, sir. As opposed to a credit card. Thank you, sir.
Any more questions for Senator Hickman? Senator Hickman, let's take a few people in the
Thank you, sir.
audience here, if you don't mind.
Thank you, sir, appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Don't go anywhere, okay? Too far. Don't go too far. Wes, would you proceed first? First name on the list, Wes Richards, ATPC. Is that correct, Wes? Okay, guys, look now. We're going to stay a little longer today because we're a little late getting started, but everybody's going to have to limit this stuff to about 2 minutes. And I hate to do it to cut you off, but we got to get through here. And there's a lot of people signed up. May not make it through, just so please state your name, go as fast as you can, tell us what you got.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, folks at the committee. I get this over here. I think is it working? Okay. All right, I'll just do my statement. The payment processing industry is a critical backbone of the Georgia economy. Our companies in the state, which include over 200 fintechs and 40,000 employees, process over 70% of U.S. transactions and 30 billion in global transactions annually. The American Transaction Processors Coalition, a national coalition, chose to be headquartered here in Georgia when we founded in 2014 because of this robust and growing payments processing industry and what we coined as Transaction Alley. In fact, we were just here last week providing information on the economic impact processors have in the state and appreciated the opportunity to meet with all of you on that. Regarding SB 126, a critical component to consider is that when a payment processor facilitates a transaction, they only receive from the merchant the full dollar amount of the transaction. There is no differentiation between what the total transaction amount was versus the sales tax. Therefore, when the interchange fee is applied, the infrastructure does not support being able to exclude sales tax from the calculation. The reasons for this are speed and efficiency of transactions and privacy for the consumer. When any of us go to the store, we want our purchase to be done quickly and without hassle so that we can all be on our way with our day. Adding data fields to this process in order to separate out sales tax could slow down that process, hurting both consumers and merchants. A likely alternative for this would be to require that consumers pay twice, once for the sale itself and once for the sales tax, which would effectively double the length of time needed for the transaction to occur. Further, beginning to separate out parts of the transactions could become a breach of privacy for consumers, as the new system would likely have to obtain specific purchase information to determine what is indeed the sales tax and what is the actual purchase. If this legislation were to be implemented, it would be at a heavy cost for processors as they rebuild their systems, depriving them from capital investments for innovation and growth here in Transaction Alley. And the cost of setting up the new terminals and software that would be needed would be very high for merchants as well. Small businesses in particular would not have a high enough volume of transactions to offset the cost of these new systems with any savings that they might receive from the legislation. This legislation, while well-intended, would place an extreme and undue burden on businesses, large and small, to re-architect their systems to implement these new requirements. We hope that you will consider these factors as you evaluate SB 126 closely. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
All right, let's moving on down the line. Rhodes McLonahan, did I say it right? Tell us who you are. Tell us who you are.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me here today to testify. My name is Rhodes McClanahan, the CEO of First American Bank in Athens, Georgia, and currently serve as the chairman of the Georgia Bankers Association, representing all but one community banks in the state of Georgia. I know y'all had a hearing last week, and you know the participants in a transaction. We, as banks, are the issuers. Senator Hodges, you had a question, albeit a rhetorical question last week, was, is the payment network free? And the answer obviously is no, it's not free. So what I wanted to do is explain some of the costs that banks incur in order to participate in this system. But by the way, the bank, the merchant, the acquirer, and the consumer are all willing participants. Nobody has to, a consumer does not have to pay with a debit card. A merchant doesn't have to accept a debit card. A bank doesn't have to issue a debit card, but we all do because it's a highly efficient payment system that allows the flow of transactions, the flow of goods in an efficient manner. The costs that we incur, number one, are the costs to issue the cards. We have thousands of customers, and issuing those cards come at a cost. For us, we started out with a standard magnetic stripe card. We've moved to the chip-enabled cards, which cost more, and now we're doing the contactless cards. And the reason we do that, which we don't have to, is a convenience to the consumer because the speed of the transaction is a lot higher, and it's a more secure form of payment when you're using that contactless card, so the fraud goes down. We incur costs to be a part of the network. We incur costs to put fraud detection, the neural scoring that goes in when you use your card to buy that jacket. There is a sophisticated system that's analyzing whether that's outside the normal purchases that you do, and it could possibly kick that transaction into a transaction that needs to be reviewed more carefully. The reason I bring that up is because banks absorb just about 100% of fraud cost. So if I were to take your card today and I go to Zaxby's to use the card at Zaxby's, which, by the way, Zaxby's not going to accept a check. I've never seen a Zaxby's accept a check, at least when I've been there, because it's not an efficient form of payment. But if I use your card at Zaxby's, they're not looking at my signature. They're not looking at my ID. They want that transaction to occur quickly. If that transaction comes back because you say somebody stole your card, the bank pays for that cost. So yes, the bank is paid through the interchange in the network, but we're paid for a service that we're providing, and we agree to absorb these costs in order to participate in the network. I think that Senate Bill 126, I certainly understand where the merchants are coming from, but if you pass this bill, basically you're taking savings that they have and shifting it to banks, because that's who's going to be harmed. Banks are going to be harmed because now you've taken that interchange that we would have had to offset all the costs that we have to process transactions as one of the key participants in that payment network, and you're shifting that to us. So there is certainly a winner and there's a loser, but there's not been a problem with this payment networks for all these years. I'm not sure why it's coming up now. But all of them are willing participants. So I also am against this bill, and once again I thank you for allowing me to come to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Thank you. You had a question? One question. Oh, Senator.
I'm sorry, but I just listened to your testimony. You make it sound as if the banks really don't want to issue these cards at all. Am I correct, or is that just a misunderstanding?
No, as I mentioned, we're willing participants in the network. Whether you pay with a check or pay with a debit card, to us it really doesn't matter. What we want is to provide as many delivery channels of those funds of our customers as possible. Our problem is if we decide we don't want to pay these fees, we could stop. But I'm not going to be the only bank in town that doesn't have debit cards issued to my customers, because the consumer is the one that's carrying those debit cards around because they know that it's an efficient form of payment. So to answer your question, no, I want to be able to provide my consumers with that extra delivery channel in terms of being able to process that, purchase that good. Our job is just to make sure that they have access to their funds to be able to purchase what they want.
Further, are you arguing that it's not a profitable business for banks to issue these cards?
Banks are for-profit businesses. I'm not arguing that it's not a for-profit. What I'm saying is there are a lot of costs associated with it, just like merchants. Merchants are for-profit businesses. The whole reason they're trying to push for this change is to save money. Basically it's in the bill. They don't think it's fair, to have to pay for something, and they feel like they're losing. All I'm saying is that if you pass this bill, you're passing that cost from the merchant to the bank.
And that would apply to credit cards as well?
We do not issue credit cards, but it would apply to credit card. Banks do issue credit cards. We don't. First American Bank does not. But yes, the same thing applies.
Are there interests charged on the use of those credit cards from banks and other institutions?
Well, once again, we as a community bank in Athens, Georgia, don't issue credit cards. If a consumer has, just as a credit card, as a consumer with a credit card, if I don't pay my balance off during the course of the month, then I know that I'm going to have to pay interest.
Sure.
Because I'm being extended credit for the use of those funds.
And what are the typical rates on bank credit cards?
I don't know. I pay my credit card off every month, so I don't have to pay that fee. You'll have to ask a credit card issuer.
So you're in the business and you're not aware of what banks would charge on a credit card, interest-wise?
Usury.
I'm I'm pretty aware of most charges, but not on everything that we don't personally offer. Could you, I mean, do you know how much they charge? I don't know. I really don't.
I mean, how much I pay
Senator
a month.
Jones has the Express Black Card, that real nice, you know,
I
had to
know.
worry about that kind of stuff.
I will tell you this. You're
Some
not
of us
charged-
has
I will tell you
18%.
this. I can tell you this for certainty. You're not charged interest for the use of a debit card. That's the best I can do.
Let's move on, guys.
Thank you.
Let's move on. Thank you kindly, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you.
Okay. So much for the 2-minute warning, right? David Black. David in the house? How you, sir?
I'm well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the committee. David Black with Georgia Banking Company, representing the Community Bankers Association of Georgia. I'll keep my comments brief, as many of my concerns align to comments made by Rhodes just now. On the surface, I commend the author of this bill, titling it the Consumer Inflation Reduction and Tax Fairness Act. I mean, who wouldn't be in favor of those attributes? But I think in reality, this bill misses the mark in terms of actual implications. This bill will not benefit consumers, it will not curb inflation, and it's not fair. First of all, from a macro perspective, any type of wholesale change this dramatic in the payment structure system should be pursued at the federal level, not state by state. If this bill were passed, it would make Georgia an island in the nationwide payment system and threaten our position as a leader in the payments industry. This island effect is why a long list of similar proposals have been considered in other states in previous years, and in my view, all defeated for that reason. If there are concerns with the costs borne by retailers associated with collecting state sales tax, it should be addressed in other ways, not interchange. This bill would add complexity, increase operational burdens, and invite litigation. The reality is, access to the card payment network comes at a cost, and card issuers bear the risk associated with the entirety of the transaction, not a portion. This bill wouldn't reduce the cost associated with processing transactions, but rather shift the expense associated with processing a transaction, creating an inherent disconnect for the entities that are bearing the risk of fraud. And I can assure you the costs to investigate and pursue fraud are significant. Therefore, in practice, the proposed legislation will be a backdoor government price control on the electronic payments industry, including community banks. These community banks, like mine, are capital providers for the consumers and small businesses in your districts, and likely sponsors of more than our fair share of T-ball teams. We operate on tight margins and already have an enormous amount of compliance obligations and fraud risks to manage. So our uniform opposition to this bill should not be surprising. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Got two coming up at the same time. Miss Sydney and Margie, Sydney Sherrill and Margie Burton, correct? Please take the mic, sir. I'll put you both on.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. We will try to be brief as well. My name is Sydney Serrell. I serve as the Vice President of Advocacy for the Georgia Credit Union Association, representing 2.2 million Georgians who obtain financial services from one of the 92 credit unions here in Georgia. I'm here today to oppose Senate Bill 126, misleadingly titled the Consumer Inflation Reduction and Tax Fairness Act. We've covered a little bit today what swipe fees are and what they're used for, but just to drill down into those details, credit unions are not-for-profit financial cooperatives, and credit unions depend on the non-interest income from interchange fees to protect their members when retailers don't. Just to paint a picture of the financial impact, for a small credit union, 25% of the interchange income received as part of this interchange swipe fee goes to fraud. And that's not counting employee time or network costs. Now, that's a smaller credit union. For a larger credit union, last year, $1 million went into protecting and reimbursing member issues. Financial institutions are responsible for protecting consumers from data breaches often caused by retailers. Recent instances, in fact, which have resulted in big box retailers paying financial institutions millions of dollars for those breaches. And as credit unions devote more money to protecting their members from fraud, there is a cost related to doing so. When the data breach does occur, it's not the retailer who's covering the loss or the restaurant or the business. It's the credit union, and not for a portion of the transaction, but for the entirety, because we're going to make our members whole when a breach occurs. This is a very important issue and something that has grave impacts to your local financial institutions, serving 2.2 million Georgians. They're in your communities. A lot of you have probably heard from them on this issue, and this is not the first time we've seen proposed regulation on interchange, and we felt the effects of that interchange when it passed at the federal level 12 years ago. And we actually found, there's a study, the Federal Reserve found that 98% of savings as a result of what happened at the federal level 12 years ago with a federal cap on debit interchange, that 98% of those savings were never passed through to consumers, and that 20% of merchants actually increased prices. While we appreciate the retail community's plight around this long-fought federal level battle around interchange, this proposal would only increase the bottom lines for big box retailers at the expense of local credit unions who serve your local consumers and constituents. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. My name is Margie Burton, and I am Vice President of Card Services with Associated Credit Union. I've been with our credit union for 27 years. We have 20 branches throughout Georgia and represent 160,000 Georgians. In addition to adding the additional enhanced strategies to secure our cards and fraud prevention technology investments, in 2022, our credit union members reported fraud on more than 4,700 transactions, totaling $1.269 million in unauthorized activity. That is an 18.92% from the number of cases reported in 2021, as well as a 16% increase in the total dollars reported on fraud in 2021. Speaking logistically on SB 126, please note, and it's been stated already, that we are not involved in any way on the breakdown of the actual transaction itself and the amount to determine the true impact to us. When the merchant sends the transactions to us, we are unaware of what portion of that transaction is taxable or not. And for cases of fraud, we will be left at a disadvantage because we will be giving back 100% of the transaction to the cardholder to make them whole. We are also one of the last few credit unions who are able to offer a reward on our debit card transactions for every purchase, and legislation such as SB 126 will make it impossible for us to continue this great benefit to our cardholders and will ultimately dismantle that program. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
You keep saying fraud, and I understand you all. If somebody steals my card and makes a purchase, you immediately refund my card. I mean, that's what banks and credit unions do.
Correct.
Would SB 126 change that? If somebody stole my card and made a fraudulent thing?
Well, we are already losing a portion of the interchange that we're going to receive off of the sales tax portion. So when we refund that full amount, how will we be reimbursed for that amount of interchange that we did not receive, since it was an unauthorized transaction?
Good answer. Thank you. Thank you, girl. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, Brandy Bickle, if I can read, Dawn Goldgrove, is that right?
She's so nice, she wouldn't have corrected you anyway. It's Dawn Colgrove.
Yes.
No.
Just state it for the record. Go ahead.
No, thank you. And thank you, committee. I believe we've spoken with every single one of you. My name is Brandy Bickle. I'm with Georgia's Own Credit Union. On behalf of our 238,000 members in the state of Georgia, we are opposed to this legislation. Not just for what it does to the interchange system, but for the precedent that it sets. Senate Bill 126 is not unique around the country. It's one of several bills that are being pursued on a national level, and it's part of a big, giant tug-of-war that's happening on the federal level over interchange. This is not new. This happened 13 years ago, 12 years ago, as you heard, on the debit card interchange. This is happening on a federal level now on the credit card hence seeing all these different bills. And interchange, and this is brought up a little bit, interchange is based on the full transaction. So that's the amount that's riding across those payment rails. And that's where we get very, very, very concerned over what this legislation seeks to do. Because when when a transaction happens, it goes through in that full amount. This bill is asking you to ignore the fact that that full amount is going across those rails. It's asking you to ignore the fact that retailers are eligible for vendor compensation, or that they can charge surcharges, or that they can even offer discounts to pay it in a different manner. And it's asking you to piecemeal out different parts of that and say, okay, this amount should be charged, but this amount shouldn't be charged for the interchange. Meanwhile, the full amount's going across. And you've heard the ladies before talk a little bit about fraud. That's a big deal for credit unions. From our credit union, like we said, we're taking care of that full amount that's riding on those rails. From a fraudulent standpoint, if that amount, someone steals your card, like you said, they charge it, this bill's already passed, that interchange is charged just on like the purchase price but not on the sales price. The whole calculation is based incorrectly then from how we are going to compensate you as the consumer. And this is not the same thing as chargebacks. You may hear retailers come up and talk a little bit about how they get charged back when things don't go there, when they have to cover a cost of a transaction. That is when the merchant themselves did not follow the rules, the card processing rules. So they are in turn getting that amount, and Dawn's looking at me like I'm wrong, but I am right. Yeah, okay. But from a fraud perspective, fraud is so much more explosive than chargebacks. From my credit union alone, we see over $1 million, just over or under, of attempted fraud a month. 94 to 96% of that is coming from cards each month. Now that's attempted fraud. It's not the same thing. And we employ a lot of different practices, neural networks trying to check to see, okay, let's make sure we're protecting your money as a consumer. Reissuing cards, the gentleman from the bank spoke, we reissue up to 7,000 cards a month because people are seeing fraud based on data breaches on the merchant level. Interchange helps augment that cost. It does not cover that cost. But in wrapping up, the bill itself has a lot more problems beyond the national interchange fight. It creates a price cap. It creates new liability to the financial institution whenever we look at recalculating our costs. That's found in lines 47 to 50. It conflicts with itself on how the payment network is supposed to lay out how they're supposed to follow the rules, and that's in line 33 to 42. But most importantly, it creates a precedent that says, okay, anytime you have a charge that must happen, that it should be done for free. And that precedent will create costs, and those costs will eventually be borne by the consumer itself. And so on that point, we just ask, there's been 26 other states that have looked at this that said no to this bill. We're asking Georgia to do the same. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dawn Colgrove, who's with Members First Credit Union here in Decatur, Georgia.
Yes, we have about 35,000 members here in Georgia. The proposed interchange bill will weaken the card payment systems. It will increase costs for consumers on goods and services, and it will also impact credit unions and credit union members negatively. Changes to these complex payment systems, as you've heard, are going to require costly programming and really even figuring out how this would work, truly. The cost ultimately will be passed down to the consumers in some way. And this is also going to cause inconsistency from state to state, which again causes problems with the processing systems overall when you have a lot of inconsistencies. A decrease in interchange will negatively impact Georgia credit unions and their members. You've heard this today as well. Interchange helps issuers quite often with protecting cardholders with different fraud prevention methods. Our credit union itself has added 3 different methods this year, new solutions, because they're constantly evolving as fraud is changing. We also cover the full amount of fraud losses on fraud transactions, as you've heard numerous times today. And then providing the support of the program, the issuing the cards, and supporting the program itself. The payment cards, again, they offer convenience for everyone involved, whether it's the cardholder, the issuer, or the merchant. And merchants have a choice of how they want to accept payments. At this point, this bill will have a negative impact on not-for-profit credit unions and all of our credit union members. So please oppose the bill.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Kaylin Tinsley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kaylin Tinsley. I'm the Director of State Government Relations for Global Payments, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you some of our concerns today regarding Senate Bill 126. Global Payments is a payments technology and software company providing payment processing services around the globe to merchants around the globe. Our company got its start here in Atlanta in 1960 and have grown exponentially over the decades, including through the merger of Total System Services, or TSYS, another Georgia-based and Georgia-grown payment processor in Columbus. Today, excuse me, we remain headquartered in Atlanta today, and we employ 24,000 team members across the globe, 7,000 of which are based here in Georgia, and are proud to provide a vital role in the electronic payments ecosystem that's responsible for safely and seamlessly facilitating billions of transactions every year, a system that is secure and working optimally. As a payment processor, we enter into contractual business arrangement with a merchant that enables their ability to offer credit and debit payment options for their consumers or customers. Our responsibility to the merchant is to shepherd that transaction from the 3-second authorization a cardholder receives at point of sale, all the way through the settlement with the merchant. Simply put, think of us as the plumbing in your home. Payment processors are charged with moving the flow of the transaction from the point of sale device where you insert your debit and or credit card to the card network system such as MasterCard and or Visa, to the issuing bank system, the bank that backs your credit and or debit card, and ultimately to the merchant's bank account where they're compensated for your purchase that you made with your credit and or debit card. To the consumer and merchant, this process may seem simple and straightforward, but it's highly complex and multifaceted. Payment processors are compensated for the services we provide to merchants through the application of a transaction fee. Currently, payment processors cannot see the breakdown of an electronic transaction. In other words, we do not see that you purchase milk, bread, eggs, clothes, and books at a merchant's location, all of which have different tax applications depending on the state and local jurisdiction. And we do not know which portion of that total amount is for the goods and services purchased, or which portion is taxed. We only see the total transaction amount. In order to comply with the provisions of Senate Bill 126, every entity involved with the facilitation of an electronic transaction would have to make substantial technological investments to update all of the systems that ultimately must talk to one another when processing a credit and or debit transaction without disruption and with the same protections afforded to the merchant and consumer that we provide today. In addition, the provisions of Senate Bill 126 would require the companies in the electronic payments ecosystem to fully absorb the costs. While the cost associated with a significant change in operations is extremely concerning, which is equally as troublesome, is the mandate that Senate Bill 126 has been requiring one commercial entity to provide another commercial entity business services for free. Under the proposed measure, if the total transaction is $107, $100 is the actual cost of your purchase, and $7 is the tax amount applied, a processor would be compensated for authorizing, processing, and settling the $100, but not compensated for doing the same thing for the $7 tax amount. However, processors would still be required to provide the same benefits and assurances for the $7 in tax, such as fraud protection, certainty of payment, cybersecurity, among other benefits. But the merchant would pay nothing for the cost of maintaining the infrastructure and processes needed to support the taxed portion of the transaction, thereby receiving a service for free. It was also mentioned that this bill has the option for a rebate. We would simply put that, in order to be able to see that information, we would still have to update a significantly part of our systems. There's already existing state law that provides credit to compensate merchants for the cost of sales tax collection and remittance. We believe the concerns raised by the proponents of this measure would be more appropriately addressed by exploring changes to existing law versus the passage of Senate Bill 126. It is for these reasons that we respectfully oppose the measure. Thank you for your time today and thoughtful consideration. We'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, question for you.
Yes, sir.
We're having issues here. I caught something in your testimony just saying, right now, if I charge something on my credit card, you don't know what I'm charging, you just know the amount. Is that what I understand?
That's correct. We only see the final transaction amount.
So if we change this, are you telling me that you would have to see what I charged on my credit card?
Yes, sir. We would need to see the exact SKU information, exactly what you purchased to determine is it taxable, is it not taxable, et cetera.
So you'd have to line item each
Yes, sir.
thing on the deal?
Yes, sir. We would need to know, did you purchase milk? Did you purchase eggs? Did you purchase
So we're
books or-
tax-free or whatever's not taxed?
Correct. In order to make that change, we would need to know that information. Right now, all we see is that you spent $236.32 at Walmart, right? We don't know the breakdown of all those items.
Got a question from Chairman Strickland?
Yes, sir.
Well, as a follow-up on that, I guess it was alluded to earlier that could fall on the retailer. Would that fall on the retailer or the consumer? Is this something that a retailer would have to basically enter into some sort of agreement with the card issuer as far as how numbers are reported, or?
That's all unclear, right? This is kind of a great brand new territory, but for a payment processor's point of view, we would need to be able to see that information if we were responsible for bifurcating what's the actual purchase amount that you have in your goods and services and what's the actual tax amount. We would need to be able to see that data.
Well, that's gonna cut out the Victoria's Secrets run. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
What can I tell you? Where we at now? Ben's gonna be next. Ben Cowart, please. Ben Cowart, is that right? I get it right? Thank you. You sure? Guys, I apologize. We've got other committee members that have other meetings. He's got to go chair one. Our chairman here, Chairman Dixon, does. So we're having a hearing, so we're okay. We don't have to worry about it. Ben?
Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ben Cowart. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for Georgia Retailers. I'd like to start by thanking the sponsor of Senate Bill 126, Senator Billy Hickman, for bringing this important piece of pro-business consumer protection legislation. So Georgia Retailers represents over 134,000 retail locations, large and small, across the state. And as Senator Hickman mentioned, when a consumer buys a product and they use a credit or debit card, the retailer pays a fee to the processors that we call a swipe fee. Retailers understand that swipe fees are part of doing business, and but we just feel that it's not only paid on the cost of the product, but it's also paid on the state-imposed tax that a retailer must collect and submit to the state. So we feel it's not right that a retailer should have to pay a fee on revenue that they are not keeping. Fees collected on the tax portion of receipt are dollars that are leaving the local economy. Senate Bill 126 would help slow the rising cost of goods and keep more Georgia dollars in Georgia. Retailers as well as consumers have been facing record inflation. As prices go up, the amount retailers pay on swipe fees goes up. What many people don't realize is that over the past decade, the amount of money retailers have spent on credit and debit card swipe fees has more than doubled. In fact, thanks to inflation, they soared 25% in 2021 alone. Swipe fees are the second highest operating cost for retailers behind labor. And just for an example, a member of mine, The Big Store in Tifton, Georgia, a single store retailer with 20 employees, paid right around $8,000 in fees just on sales tax last year. So we're just simply asking for some relief from having to pay a fee to card companies to collect tax that is then remitted to the state. And, I think a lot of what's been mentioned today is fraud, and, I'm pretty new to this position at Georgia Retailers, but it's my understanding that oftentimes the retailer is charged a chargeback fee. And then another thing to think about is that retailer is also out the product that was bought on the fraudulent charge. So we're just really asking for a little bit of relief here and asking for the committee's favorable consideration on Senate Bill 126. Thank you for listening, and
We're
I'm
having,
happy to answer
well,
any
as you know, it's
questions.
hearing only, okay? As you know, correct me if I'm wrong. If you go to buy gas today, any fuel stop, it'll say, let's just use $3 for example. $3 is the price you pay cash. $3.20 is the price if you pay, or is it 10 cents? Maybe 10 cents more, whatever. If you pay with a card. Are you saying that these companies will reduce that price down and go to one fee, or you think? I mean, they're going to keep on adding the dollars if they're getting them.
The credit card companies?
No, the retailer, the guy selling the stuff.
You know, that's a great question, and I'd happy to get back with you on that and talk to some of my members and see exactly how they would handle that.
Okay, I'm just in my mind here. Thank you. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Ben. Who seconded this? Hunter? Hunter Loggins, please. NFIB, right?
Yes, sir.
Not for international business?
That's right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Hunter Loggins. I am with the National Federation of Independent Business. We are the voice of small business. We have over 6,500 members in the state of Georgia, all of them independently owned and operated, and almost all of them are mom and pops with 10 or fewer employees. We are a one-member, one-vote organization, and our members voted overwhelmingly to support this measure. You should have in your packet some member testimony. Sadly, they couldn't be here today because they are operating their small business. They are the presidents, the CEO, but they are the dishwashers, they are the accountants, they're doing anything and everything, and they need help. With labor shortages, supply chain issues, rising premiums, and rampant inflation, we support any measure that will give our small businesses some relief. It was mentioned earlier that sometimes maybe they'll just raise their rates if this were to pass. You know, that's their prerogative. It's the principle of the matter. We are collecting the sales tax for the state, and that is just the cost of doing business, and we understand that. But it's a principle measure that we are doing that, and they're getting it when not contributing to commerce, in our opinion. And a lot of times they'll say, just put it back on the consumer or just eat the cost. Our members can't eat the cost, and they don't want to put it back on the consumer, who can just go down to the big blockchain down the road. And then our small businesses shut our doors because that's just one more thing they have to pay for. So, I mean, that's short and sweet of it. I'm happy to answer any questions, but please help our struggling small businesses and pass this measure.
Senator Strickland has a question.
Sure. Thank you. You mentioned potentially rates could get raised on you if this passes. There was reference earlier to system costs. Is there any concern that if we pass this, and I don't know if lines 47 through 50 address this, but the law could be circumvented by additional costs now for new equipment or whatever it's going to take to calculate the fees?
Sure, and it is my understanding, thank you for the question, that it is optional for businesses. If they want to continue doing business as usual, they can and pay whatever they can or whatever they're currently paying in swipe fees. This would just add an extra option, and they could weigh their costs if they want to implement a new point of sale system to break down the sales tax. And I think somebody's going to speak on that, on the technical aspects in a little bit, but it is optional. And you know, we're all in favor of more options for our small businesses.
Yeah, I guess one follow-up, and you don't have to, it's not necessarily for you, but I wonder if that's the intent, though, of the author is to, because it's mentioned that you can't raise the rates. We could pass this law, no matter how you feel about the law, if you pass it and then folks get around it by just raising rates, it says in the current draft you can't do that. And I wonder if
Correct,
we
from a
should.
state level, but
Right.
if more and more states that are pushing this measure to implement it, it might be a conversation that's had federally.
But I just wonder if we ought to also have something about the system cost, because again, no matter how you feel about the law, if you're going to pass it, and then there's some new system cost fee that just eats up the savings for small businesses, that concerns me too.
Sure.
And who will to tag on that question? Will the small businesses have to pay for all their new software, all their new way of doing these issues and whatever?
They would, and they would weigh the costs, and if it makes sense, they would implement that system if it were to save them in the long run for these.
Is it a two swipe deal basically still though?
Well, I'm not so sure that they need to swipe. There are some very smart people. They said there are some high-tech systems that they're using. On one swipe, it'll filter it out. But as I said, that could come back on the business, that cost of implementing that point-of-sale system. But it would be something they would have to weigh, and if it makes sense in the long run, they could implement it. They don't have to. It's just an option.
Last question. NFIB represents 50 states?
We are a national organization that represents all 50 states, yes.
What other state is doing this or has done this?
I believe it's Mississippi has done something similar.
Doing it or have done it?
They're currently doing it.
They're currently doing it.
I don't think anything, there might be somebody who could correct me, but I don't think anything has passed so far.
Thank you.
North Dakota is another.
11? 12. All right.
Quick question. Is it the position of the NFIB that, or the Georgia Retailers Association, that your clients aren't being paid enough money to collect taxes, sales taxes for the state of Georgia?
I can't speak on that. I haven't talked to anybody that feels that way, I'm sure, but that's something I could ask and get back to you on that.
Well, has anybody approached the state about increasing compensation for collection of sales taxes?
As of that, I'm not so sure, but from that standpoint, it worries me because if it's in the state control, at any moment, should, God forbid, the state coffers aren't as fantastic as they are now with the current administration, that could be taken away.
Couldn't the state do the same thing with this legislation?
Of course, yes,
Okay.
but through the representatives that were elected, yes.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Jake Tench, please.
Good afternoon, committee. I appreciate you allowing me to come speak in support of this legislation. My name is Jake Tench. I'm with Georgia Agribusiness Council. We are a trade association that represents over 1,300 members all across the state, ranging anywhere from small family farms to ag retailers, food service establishments, all of those. As you are probably aware, agriculture is our largest industry, over $73 billion in economic output, over 340,000 jobs. And those are large numbers, but I want to harp on the fact that that is generated through small business. This issue that this legislation aims to address is of significant cost to many of our members. We understand that there is a cost to doing business, but when you look at the local roadside farmers market or the U-Pick operation, agritourism, local farm supply store, this costs hundreds of thousands of dollars every year to our members. Like I said, agribusiness is no stranger to input costs or the cost of doing business, but it is our mission that if we can possibly save them $1 of that cost, then we have to try to do it. And we believe that this legislation is a step in that direction.
I have a question on that. Make sure I'm wrong. You're talking about agribusiness, so most
Yes, sir.
agribusiness should be using a gate card. If that, would they not?
So on certain pieces of equipment, so on-farm equipment, so if I went to buy a shovel for on-farm use, that would be tax exempt, correct. But if, say, I own the local farm supply in my hometown, I sell a bag of grass seed or a bag of fertilizer for someone's yard or whatever it may be, those are not tax exempt. You also have to be a generating profit farm in order to qualify for the gate card.
Okay.
So most products are not tax exempt through the gate card.
I
Some
just didn't
are,
want to make it all agriculture. I see what you're saying, but I just wouldn't, because I know
Yes,
that,
sir.
you know, majority of ag stuff would be the gate card, which is a wonderful thing, has been great for agriculture.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
on that part.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Scott Bremen, is that right? Say it right? Bierman. 5 o'clock somewhere, right? That's right. We gotta,
Hey, with a last name like that, I should be with the craft brewers instead of the restaurant association, right? Thank you so much for having me testify today. I appreciate you all being here. Scott Bierman, I'm the Senior Director of Government Affairs for the Georgia Restaurant Association. We represent, it seems to be the case, everybody says who they represent 20,000 plus eating and drinking locations and 500,000 employees here in the state of Georgia. You know, the last few years, I think we can go back 3 years, look at COVID. It's been a rough struggle for our folks. You know, we closed down our restaurants, and since then we've seen hyperinflation. We've seen food costs go up, 18% in the last few years, 10% in the last year alone. We've seen labor shortages. We go to a restaurant, you go to your favorite restaurant sometimes, and you see tables wide open, but a line out the door waiting to get in because there's not enough staff there to seat your folks. We know we're an industry where traditionally the profit margin is between 5 and 6%. Due to these kind of economic pressures, that's down to 1 to 2%. Our folks are struggling. When we talk about something like this, we talk about these numbers. It's not for your average mom and pop restaurant. We're not talking life-changing money. We're not talking tens of thousands of dollars that they would see. We're seeing smaller chunks, but those chunks could mean paying rent, making payroll, staying open a little bit longer. Troubling stat we saw at the end of last year in December, 52% of independently owned restaurants in the U.S. couldn't pay their December rent. This isn't I don't say all this to say it's a sob story, because honestly our folks are resilient. Where we were before COVID and where we are now, we're coming back and we're fighting hard, and our folks love to be parts of their community, and they love to give back. This is just a way to help them, again, meet those payrolls, keep the doors open, and continue to serve. That's most of our folks are in this to serve their community, to give back to their folks. They like to be hospitable. They like to open their doors. This gives them a chance to continue to do that in some troubling and difficult economic times. I really appreciate y'all staying this long tonight, this afternoon, and hearing from us all, and appreciate all that you do in hearing this bill. Thank you so much.
You first or me? Miss Kathy, I know that's what. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee who are left. I'm Kathy Kazava, President of the Georgia Food Industry Association. I represent everybody from the supermarkets, the large supermarkets like the Walmarts, Publix, Kroger's of the world, onto your local Striplings, Harvey's, Food Lion, Wayfield Foods, your IGAs. We're here, and I want to say, Angela and I work very well together, from convenience stores to grocery stores. We kind of represent the full industry. We thought we were going to have a technical expert for you today, so we have written a lot of notes to get a lot of things answered for you. But I don't want to repeat anything in essence of time, but I do want to talk about a few things. We've talked about, is the system broken? And somebody asked that question, and I want to tell you about one of my retailers, my independent retailers, who last night called me and said on the way to work yesterday, he saw an ad, or listened to an ad on the radio, talking about a 5% card, one of the fancy swanky cards, 5% back on groceries. And he said, I wish the committee and I wish every person in this state could understand who is paying for that 5%. He said, we don't make 5%. We wish we could make 5%. So a couple of things, I know I've talked to all of you, but a couple of things I want to leave you with. The grocery industry has a historically low profit margin, averaging 1 to 2%. We're about 2% right now. The banks and our processing fees, they are costing us 2 to 4% on an average, double what we're making for our stores. So there is something wrong here. I think the system is broken. Unfortunately, you don't have the ability at the state level to talk about the real issue, which is the cost of processing for us. But you do have some rights and some capabilities to talk about what we're here today. The only thing we are asking for is simply to prohibit being charged interchange fees on the sales tax portion of our order. It's a simple ask. Now, we're going to have a technical person, but some of the things that we heard, I've written great notes and I'm going to get you answers. But some of the things just weren't correct from my standpoint.
I want to tell you one other thing. My husband bought a phone the other day. He didn't tell me he was buying the phone. And I know, right? So I got a text saying, is this a real charge? I immediately answered no. So I called my husband. Somebody committed fraud on our card. Actually, he said, no, I just bought a phone. I just didn't tell you. So let me tell you what happened. That retailer that sold that phone immediately did not get, the charge was reversed. So what happens, we've heard a lot about fraud. The retailers, and I'm going to get you more information so that we can make sure that we're telling you the absolute, exact, honest truth. But what happened to that retailer? We had to call that retailer back to say, process that charge. It indeed was a charge. It was a real charge. So that retailer, not one of mine, but that phone store was going to be out a phone and the full charge that was charged to them if I didn't answer correctly. My husband didn't do anything wrong. He used his card properly. Nobody stole the card, but the bank was on top of it, questioning, was it a real charge? As soon as I said no, that retailer was going to be out the charge as well as the amount. That's what happens with groceries too. So I want to make sure that you understand when we talk about fraud, there's a whole bunch of fraud that happens to us as well. So there are just a few things that I want to leave you with. I'm going to get you a lot of answers. One of them, the tax amount. You heard the fact that that the banks or the processors would have to get a line-by-line item on what was charged. That's not true. What I did before this was supermarket cash register processing, and what I did was I programmed those registers. The registers are all programmed. We don't need, we have every single item based on their taxability already programmed in our system. Nobody has to see the total order. When you have, we comply with the Department of Revenue in filling out our sales tax and comply with that. You see the total amount of sales tax. You don't have to see line by line by line. Nobody has to do that. Again, I am not a technical expert, but I have been told that we don't need new process, or we don't need expensive systems to do this. Visa and MasterCard, again, they update their systems twice a month, and I've been told just in those updates that they can, or twice a year rather, that they can go ahead and do it there. The other thing is we could ask for a rebate, and again, I'm told not, when we will have some technical, very, very good technical information to you, but I am told nobody has to get a new system. This is not going to cost the small retailer anything, or I would not be here before you today. So I appreciate you, and Georgia Food Industry Association appreciates your support. Angela?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I will be very brief. I'm Angela Holland. I represent the Georgia Association of Convenience Stores. We represent roughly about 2,000 of the over 6,000 stores in our state. We process 7 million transactions every day. So in 2 days' time period, we touch every Georgian in the state. And many of those use their credit card at fuel pumps, and we pay almost $100,000 a year in swipe fees. So anything we can get to help alleviate that expense, we'd very much appreciate. And we appreciate Senator Hickman for bringing the bill, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Couple, if you don't mind. Going back to what
Certainly.
we talked about those swipe fees on fuel. Would that eliminate the 10-cent surcharge, like if fuel's $3 and you say for cash, or if it's $3.10 with your credit card? You think passing this would eliminate that?
I don't know if they would eliminate that, but I do know when excise tax was, backed off a year ago or 2 years ago, when there was a stay on the excise tax, you saw that at the street immediately. So I would, retailers need to cover their cost, but the gas is the only commodity that is priced at the street, and people will drive 30 cents of gas out of their tank to save a nickel. So it's extremely price conscious product.
And Miss Kathy, let me understand something. You furnish your husband a credit card, correct? I want to make sure we got that right, because they should have called your husband if it had been his card, but he called you because it was your card.
Well, actually, somehow the account has become in my name. He can't
got
figure it
that
out. So yes, Mr. Chairman, that's actually true. Oh, and one other thing, if I could talk about vendors' compensation. That question did come up years ago. And I have done this job for many years. Years ago, the retailers were compensated 2% of all of the sales tax that they returned to the state for their collection. Now it has gone down, and that was before we had processing fees of who bought groceries with a credit card. That didn't used to happen years and years ago. But we were compensated 2% of all our sales tax. Now, years later, with the processing fees that have gone nuts, we get 3% on the first $3,000 and 0.5% on the remaining. So it doesn't touch so our costs have gone up drastically, and what the state compensates has gone down drastically. We, again, are not comfortable with asking the state to correct that by increasing the vendor's compensation. We're trying to keep our costs as low as we can, and if we can do it, any way we can do it, we're not asking the state to do it. We're asking just this minimal relief on just the sales tax portion of what we collect.
Thank you, Ms. Kathy. Okay, guys, we've had, we're 3 o'clock here. We're getting close to another committee meeting starting. It is a foregone conclusion, Senator Hickman, that you can take a 2.5-page bill and make it quite complicated. And we appreciate you bringing the bill to us, whatever, folks. I can't promise you when we'll have another hearing on this. I'll try to get one worked in as soon as possible. I have one question on Mike, did you have a question, Senator Hodges? Senator Kennedy, who had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Forgive me, I had to step out for
Okay.
a meeting, so if this was already covered, forgive me. But the last point you made, that apparently there was some point in time in the past where y'all were compensated at 2%.
Yes, sir.
As being paid by the state.
Yes, sir.
To acknowledge and reflect that y'all are collecting state taxes and remitting them to the state.
Correct.
And that percentage is going down to.
Drastically. Now it is 3% on the first $3,000 and 0.5% on the remaining revenue.
So why did the number go down?
It was when the state was having financial problems, and across the country, vendors' compensation was reduced for everybody.
And so have there not been any efforts to get it back to a higher number or something close to what would compensate for the expenses that are being incurred by the merchants to collect state revenue and remit them back to the state?
To be honest with you, I have not had that conversation at all. I don't know if there has been.
Do you know if there's a reason that conversation hasn't been had, or there's a reason that the state hasn't been approached and to say, we're collecting your tax revenue for you,
Right.
there's a cost associated with that. We'd like to be compensated at the level of X.
Right. It's a wonderful point, and can I get back to you?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Senator Kennedy, that sounded like a dang good compromise almost there. You're getting there. But thank y'all. Listen, guys.
Thank you
that's what
so
we have
much.
Today. It's the only thing on
Appreciate
the
you.
agenda today. Thank you all for coming. Sorry we had to
Thank you.
start a little late. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.